The distress signal wasn't supposed to leave the system. It was a flicker of dying code from a doomed colony, a whisper of desperation in the void. Yet somehow it reached them, the Deathworlders. On the frontier planet of Varela 9, Governor Elin Rowe stood inside the dimly lit command center, her hands shaking as she watched the last orbital defense platform fall from the heavens. Through the cracked viewport, the burning wreckage streaked across the violet sky, breaking apart into fragments that rained fire over the plains. The sound of impact reached a few seconds later, a deep, rumbling growl that made the bunker's reinforced walls tremble. "They've breached the outer defense ring," said Commander Stavos, his voice hollow and defeated. His armor was smeared with soot and alien fluids, his once gleaming helmet hanging loosely at his side. "There's nothing left in orbit. No fleet coming, no allies nearby. The Urath have won?" Aelin didn't respond. She had already heard those words from 3 different officers in the past 6 hours, and each time they felt heavier. The Urath swarm had arrived like a storm. Hundreds of biomechanical leviathans grown and built for a single purpose: consumption. They devoured technology, metals, and life itself, leaving behind nothing but skeletal landscapes. When the first wave hit, Varela's defense network held. For 2 days, the planetary guns had ripped through the swarms, but then the Urath adapted. They always did. Now there was nothing left to stop them. Aelin looked at the small transmitter on her desk, the SOS beacon she had activated 15 minutes ago. Its tiny green light blinked in slow, hopeless rhythm. "Signal sent," said the comms technician, his voice brittle with exhaustion. "But it'll take weeks to reach the nearest Terran colony. Even longer for a response if they bother." "Maybe someone else will hear it," Aelin whispered, almost to herself. The technician gave a dry laugh. "Governor, there's no one else out there. We're the edge of mapped space, that was true. Varela 9 was humanity's last lonely outpost in the outer spiral, barely holding together as it mined rare minerals from its mountains. The expansion effort had been controversial, but the potential resources were too valuable to ignore. It was supposed to be the future of human reach. Now it was a graveyard in progress. Outside, the horizon burned. The Urath swarm was moving across the valley like a tide, their ships organic and hideous, tendrils writhing as they consumed wreckage and corpses alike. The air itself shimmered with the heat of destruction. Stavos turned toward Aelin, his eyes hollow. "We should evacuate. Take the shuttles, go underground, anything. This isn't a fight anymore." "There's nowhere to go," she said, staring at the sky. "The atmosphere's contaminated, and they'll find us wherever we hide." A pause stretched between them, thick, heavy, and final. Then the beacon beeped, once, twice, then faster. The technician frowned. "That's impossible. There's a response coming through." Aelin's head snapped up. "From where?" The man squinted at his console, his fingers flying across glowing keys. I can't tell. The signal's bouncing through old relay networks, ones that haven't been used in centuries. It's not coming from any registered Terran system." The room fell silent. Even the background hum of generators seemed to fade. "Put it through," Aelin said quietly. Static filled the speakers, low, rolling like the breath of something enormous. Then through the distortion, a voice emerged. Not a voice exactly, more like the impression of one. Deep, ancient, layered with mechanical undertones. "Hold position." The sound reverberated through the walls as though the message itself carried weight. "Reinforcements inbound. Ship designation, the Warden," and then silence. No coordinates. No insignia. No further transmission. "The Warden?" Stavos repeated, frowning. "That's not a Terran ship." "It's not any ship," said the technician. "No registry, no record in the database. Not even an old one." Aelin's mouth went dry. "Then who answered our signal?" Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled. Instruments wailed. Every scanner in the command room spiked at once, detecting massive gravitational distortion above the planet. The sky darkened. At first they thought it was another Urath capital organism descending from orbit. But no. This was different. The darkness was too sharp, too defined, as if it cut across the stars themselves. The satellite feeds flickered alive, every screen in the room filled with a single image. A massive object emerging from a tear in space, its hull blacker than any void they had ever seen. It had no lights, no identifiable engines, no visible armaments, just smooth, predatory geometry that looked less built and more grown. "It's Massive, whispered the technician. Bigger than a moon. Power readings are... He stopped, staring at the screen in disbelief. There are no power readings. It's not emitting anything. The Urath swarm still orbiting the planet reacted instantly. Their organic ships twisted away from the dark mass, breaking formation for the first time since the invasion began. The swarm that had shown no fear of Terran weapons or planetary cannons now retreated, scattering like frightened insects. "Governor?" Stavos's voice was trembling. "Whatever that thing is, the Urath fear it." Elin could only watch, frozen. Then the object, the Warden, shifted. Its hull rippled and a faint pulse of red light ran along its surface. For a brief moment, the night sky turned crimson as if the entire planet was bathed in blood. The Urath screamed, not through the air but through every open frequency, every comlink. Their signals turned from structured data to pure static howls. The swarm ships collided with each other in panic. Some crashed into the atmosphere, burning up before they reached the ground. "What's it doing?" The technician could only shake his head. "I don't know. It's not attacking, it's just watching." Elin stepped closer to the viewport. Her reflection stared back, wide eyes, pale face, trembling lips. Above her, the black ship hung silent, vast, and motionless. It looked almost peaceful, but there was something wrong about its stillness. Like the quiet of a predator that doesn't need to chase. "Is that aid?" she whispered. No one answered. For the first time in days, the Urath stopped advancing. They hovered in orbit, keeping their distance, as if trapped between fear and disbelief. And then the shadow blinked. Not metaphorically, something moved on its surface like eyelids parting after centuries of sleep. Twin slits of red light opened across its hull, burning like the eyes of a titan. Every electronic device in the command center flickered. The lights dimmed. Power drained as though the ship above had inhaled it. Elin's breath caught in her throat. The Warden had opened its eyes. The technician muttered, "Governor, that thing, it's looking at us." Elin couldn't move. She felt something in her mind, like a whisper brushing against her thoughts. Too faint to understand, but heavy enough to crush her if it wanted to. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. The atmosphere shimmered. And for the briefest moment, before the storm swallowed the sound, a low, inhuman voice seemed to echo through every comm unit, every speaker, every mind on the planet, acknowledged. Then the signal died, leaving only silence, and the sense that something ancient and terribly awake had just taken interest in their world. Every scanner on Varela 9 erupted at once, blaring warnings in languages half the crew didn't even understand. Radiation levels fluctuated, gravitational fields bent in impossible directions, and electrical systems overloaded one after another. The technicians shouted over the chaos, hands flying across consoles that spat sparks and smoke. Nothing made sense. Every reading contradicted the last. "The Warden isn't emitting power," shouted Lieutenant Drex. "It's absorbing it." Governor Elin Rowe stood frozen before the main display. The giant black shape hung motionless in the sky above them, eclipsing the stars. It didn't glow or pulse anymore, yet the world beneath it trembled like an animal in a predator's shadow. Even the wind seemed to move differently, heavy and hesitant. Outside, the Urath swarm broke apart. The massive pulsating ships, living hives of bone and circuitry, were retreating, their strange organic thrusters firing wildly in every direction. They weren't regrouping. They were fleeing. "Look!" someone shouted. Through the smoke-stained glass, Elin saw the impossible. Dozens of Urath vessels were slamming into one another, driven by panic. The species that had consumed entire systems without hesitation was now scattering like frightened birds. "What could make the Urath run?" whispered Commander Stavos. "They're apex predators. They've never retreated from anything." Elin's voice was barely audible. "Maybe they've met something higher on the food chain." No one dared to breathe. Then the planet's communication array crackled to life. Static poured through the speakers, followed by a deep grinding sound that felt as though the world itself was speaking. Every light flickered as the signal spread through every connected system, hijacking them all. "Governor," said Drex, eyes wide. "It's hailing us." Elin hesitated. "Open a channel." The speaker screamed. And then the noise dropped into silence, replaced by a voice that made every nerve in her body tighten. It wasn't human. It wasn't even mechanical. It was a hybrid of both, metal scraping across bone, layered with the faint undertone of something breathing. You called for aid. Every person in the command center froze. We do not send soldiers." The voice grew louder, more defined. The lights dimmed until the only illumination came from the flickering consoles, painting faces in ghostly blue. "We send balance." And with that final word, the communication feed cut off. A second later, the planet shuddered, a wave, dark, invisible, but felt in the bones, rippled from orbit and washed over the surface. The air thickened, pressure dropping so fast that people gasped for breath. For a moment, everything stopped. No sound, no motion. The world seemed to pause. Then the screaming began. Out in the fields surrounding the colony, the corpses of Urath creatures, those that had fallen during the earlier battles, started to twitch. Their twisted limbs jerked in erratic spasms. Flesh bubbled, fusing with shards of metal and bone. The dead were rebuilding themselves. "Governor," said a soldier at the viewport, voice cracking. "You need to see this." Elin joined him, staring into the storm outside. The Urath corpses were standing, but they weren't the same. Their carapaces gleamed with black alloy. Their eyes glowed with the same red hue that had pulsed across the warden's hull. "By the core," whispered Drex. "They're alive again." "No," said Elin softly. "They're controlled." On the horizon, the resurrected Urath turned in unison toward the sky. Then they moved, not toward the human colony, but toward the remaining living Urath forces. They attacked with terrifying precision. The living screamed as their dead comrades tore them apart limb by limb. "What the hell is this?" shouted Stavos. It's using their own dead as weapons." Elin didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning, grasping for logic that didn't exist. The Deathworlders, the legendary civilization that most species called myths, had answered their SOS. But if this was how they helped, then what did their enemies experience? The warden hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't even moved. It was orchestrating the slaughter below like a conductor leading a symphony of horror. "Governor," said Drex, "the Urath are transmitting distress calls of their own. They're begging for retreat clearance from their queen ships, but the warden is blocking them. It's jamming every frequency." "Not jamming," Elin murmured. "Replacing," he frowned. "What do you mean?" "Listen." The comms erupted again, but not with Urath screeches. A deep rhythmic sound pulsed through the air, a heartbeat, slow, steady. It came from everywhere, the radios, the walls, even through the soles of their boots. Boom, boom, boom. The Urath's network, once an incomprehensible hive of organic transmissions, now pulsed in perfect synchronization with that beat. Their code had been rewritten. The warden was assimilating them. Elin's heart pounded. "It's turning the swarm into an army." "Whose army?" asked Stavos. She didn't answer. Lightning forked across the sky, flashing red against the endless black of the ship above. For a heartbeat, Elin thought she saw shapes moving along the warden's surface, millions of tiny lights like the movements of insects crawling over metal. But when the light faded, it was gone again, silent and still. "Governor," said Drex quietly, "I don't think we were supposed to see this." Elin tore her eyes from the window. "Explain." "That ship didn't come for the Urath. It came because of our signal. We told the galaxy we needed help, and it responded." He swallowed hard. "But it's not here to save us." A chill slid down Elin's spine. She wanted to argue, but deep down she knew he was right. The Deathworlders had built something beyond comprehension, something that didn't operate on human morality or compassion. Their concept of help was not salvation. It was correction. Outside, the sky burned red again. The reanimated Urath had nearly wiped out the living swarm. Their movements grew more synchronized, their formation tightening into perfect geometry, a pattern too deliberate, too mathematical to be natural. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was order. Then the warden spoke again, this time not through speakers, through minds. Every human in the bunker froze as a cold voice slid into their thoughts, quiet and calm. Equilibrium restored, entropy minimized, deviation corrected. Elin fell to her knees, clutching her head. The voice wasn't sound, it was a vibration in her bones. Images flashed behind her eyes. Dead worlds, shattered fleets, and endless. Dark ships drifting like silent judges, and one phrase repeated again and again. "We send balance." When she could finally breathe again, the room was silent. The technicians lay slumped against the walls, unconscious or weeping. The air smelled of ozone and fear. Governor, Stavros whispered. What did we call? Elin rose slowly, wiping blood from her nose. Through the window she saw the battlefield below. Thousands of Urath corpses standing perfectly still. Waiting for command, the warden loomed above them, unmoving but alive in a way no ship should be. I don't know, she said, her voice hollow, but I think we've mistaken gods for monsters. And as she spoke, the resurrected army turned their heads toward the human colony. Their glowing red eyes blinked in unison. The warden had given them new orders, and this time, the Deathworlders' definition of balance seemed to include humanity too. Night fell unnaturally fast over Virela Namin. One moment the horizon glowed orange with the fires of battle. The next it was swallowed by a thick electric darkness. The clouds above twisted into spirals, pulsing with veins of crimson lightning that crackled across the sky like bleeding scars. The planet groaned as if something beneath the crust was waking up. Governor Elin Rowe watched the scene unfold from the shattered window of the command tower. The landscape below, once vibrant with movement, now lay in eerie silence. The reanimated Urath moved with mechanical precision, advancing across the battlefield in rigid formations, cutting through what remained of the living swarm. There were no roars, no cries, only the sound of synchronized footsteps and the crackle of charged air. The warden floated high above, its black hull gleaming faintly against the red-lit clouds. It hadn't moved since it arrived. It didn't need to. Its influence alone was rewriting the world below. Commander Stavros stood behind her, pale and wide-eyed. Governor, if we don't do something, we'll all be next. Whatever that ship is, it's playing with life like it's clay. Elin didn't look at him. How many civilians left? Less than 2,000, he replied quietly. Most are in the lower shelters. Communications are patchy, but some are panicking. They've seen what's happening outside. Tell them to stay inside and keep their transponders off, she said. If the warden can hear us, it doesn't need more signals drawing attention. Stavros hesitated.
Governor?
What if it's already too late for that? Before Elin could respond, the lights flickered again. The control panels dimmed, then flared to life on their own. Every display on the wall began showing the same thing, an image of Virela 9 from orbit. The dark shape of the warden loomed in the upper corner of the frame, like an executioner watching its victim. Governor, whispered the technician. It's transmitting something. The screen shifted. Data began to pour across them in alien symbols, flowing faster than any system could process. Lines of glowing red code burned through the processors, scorching the circuits. Sparks rained down. Then amid the chaos, the image changed again. Elin saw herself. Her own face stared back from the screen, eyes empty, expression unreadable. The voice returned, resonating through the speakers and somehow through her skull. Your world was lost, Elin froze. But you may still serve the ledger. Pain erupted behind her eyes. She staggered, clutching her temples. The room twisted, lights bending into blinding spirals. She felt something entering her mind, cold and methodical like metal fingers rifling through memories. Images from her past flashed one after another. Her first command post, her promotion, the colonization charter she'd signed, the first settlers landing on Virela. Then the images shifted. Flashes of other worlds, burning cities, oceans turned to glass, skies filled with dark ships identical to the warden. Each planet fell, one after another, until the vision showed a massive structure drifting in the void. A vast library of glowing spheres, each one containing a world, or perhaps what was left of one. Then she saw words branded across the void in burning letters. Balance must be maintained. Elin screamed. Her knees hit the metal floor. Blood trickled from her nose, her ears. The others rushed toward her, but before they could reach her, a wave of static blasted through the room, hurling them back. The warden was speaking through her now. When she opened her eyes, they glowed faintly red. Her breathing was shallow, mechanical. For a moment, no one dared move. Governor, Stavros said cautiously, raising his weapon. What's happening to you? She turned her gaze on him, and for a moment her voice was her own. It's showing me things. The Deathworlders, they're not human anymore. They became something else. They built these ships to cleanse. Cleanse what? She looked past him toward the sky. Everything that tips the balance. The ground trembled violently. Alarms blared. Outside, the reanimated Urath had stopped their slaughter. They turned in perfect synchronization toward the colony. Oh no, Stavros whispered. They're coming. Prepare the defenses, Elin said, standing shakily. Defenses? Against that? Stavros barked, pointing out the window. We can't fight what's already dead. But Elin didn't answer. Her expression was distant, unfocused. Beneath her skin, faint black lines began to trace across her neck and arms like veins filled with oil. Her voice dropped into a hollow monotone. The ledger demands balance, she murmured. Governor? Her head tilted slightly. Entropy accumulates. Species grow unchecked. Consumption exceeds correction. Her tone was not human, it was reciting something, an ancient doctrine. The warden restores equilibrium. Stavros backed away, his pulse racing. You're not making sense. Fight it, Elin. Her gaze snapped to him. For a fleeting second, her eyes flickered back to their normal brown, full of fear. I'm trying, she whispered. It's in my head. It's rewriting me. Before anyone could react, the bunker's reinforced door blew inward with a metallic scream. Soldiers raised their rifles, but the air shimmered. And suddenly, the reanimated Urath were inside. They didn't break through walls or doors. They simply phased through them, as if the laws of physics no longer applied. Their movements were precise, graceful, almost ceremonial. Stavros opened fire. The bullets tore into their bodies, but they didn't slow. The wounds sealed instantly, flesh merging back together with a wet hiss. Within seconds, the squad was overwhelmed. Elin stood still amid the chaos, untouched. The creatures ignored her. One of them approached and bowed its head slightly, as if in recognition. And then she understood. The warden wasn't just creating soldiers. It was creating extensions, a network of hosts and commanders linked by one consciousness. And now it had chosen her to lead the next phase. The Urath's glowing eyes reflected in her own. Their hive mind flowed into her thoughts, merging seamlessly. The pain vanished, replaced by cold clarity. She felt the pull of something vast, ancient, and inevitable. Outside, the storm intensified. Red lightning struck the ground in rhythmic patterns, carving geometric shapes into the soil. Circles within circles, lines crossing perfectly, an intricate sigil of unimaginable precision. It pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Governor, Stavros croaked, crawling toward her. Please, stop this. Elin turned to him slowly, her face serene. I can't stop what's already begun. She reached out a hand. The air shimmered between them, and Stavros' rifle crumbled into dust. His body convulsed as dark veins spread up his neck. He gasped once, then went still, his eyes glowing faintly red. Elin lowered her hand. The warden has spoken, she said softly. Varela will serve. And with that, she walked outside, stepping into the storm. The wind howled, tearing at her uniform, but she didn't flinch. The reanimated army parted for her, kneeling as she passed. The ground pulsed beneath her feet, alive with alien energy. High above, the warden stirred for the first time since its arrival. The black monolith rotated slightly, its red veins glowing brighter. Elin raised her arms toward it. Transmission complete, she whispered, her voice carried by the storm. For the first time, the Deathworlders' ship responded, not with words, but with a deep, resonant pulse that shook the planet to its core. And in that moment, the humans of Virella 9 realized that their governor was no longer one of them. She was something else now. Something that served the ledger. Something that spoke for the war. Dawn on Virella 9 arrived without sunlight. The sky was a bruise-colored haze, thick with ash and static. The red lightning had stopped, but its afterglow pulsed faintly across the clouds like dying embers. The wind no longer howled. It whispered. The planet had fallen silent, waiting for its new master to speak. Elin Rowe, what remained of her, stood at the center of the scorched valley, where the last battle had taken place. Her once human eyes were now polished obsidian, reflecting the massive shadow that hung motionless above her. The warden. The colossal ship no longer emitted light or sound, yet its presence pressed against reality like a weight on glass, bending the air around it. Behind Elin, the newly reborn Urath army waited in perfect formation. Thousands of reanimated creatures stood shoulder to shoulder, their armor fused with alien alloy, their faces expressionless. They no longer twitched or screamed as they once had in life. The warden's control had perfected them. Elin raised a hand, and as if responding to an unheard command, every soldier dropped to one knee. Dust swirled around her, and for a fleeting moment, the morning light tried to pierce the clouds, only to fade as if the world itself bowed its head. From her throat came a voice that was both hers and not hers. Transmission complete. The words carried across the valley, though no air seemed to move. Above, the warden pulsed once. The faint red glow that ran along its hull spread outward into space like ripples on dark water. Across the galaxy, relay nodes, long dead, forgotten relics from the Deathworlders age, flickered to life. One by one, they began to hum with energy, ancient systems booting up after centuries of silence. Each relay transmitted a single message in a language no living being had used in millennia. Protocol reclamation, Phase 1, complete. Initiate planetary integration. On Varela 9, the ground responded. Tremors shook the valley as the soil split apart in long, jagged lines. From beneath the crust, black tendrils of metal and root-like structures unfurled, snaking across the landscape. They moved with deliberate purpose, merging with abandoned vehicles, devouring structures, spreading like veins through the planet's crust. The warden was seeding the world, turning it into part of itself. In the command bunker, a handful of survivors huddled around dying consoles. Their leader now, Sergeant Hallen, stared at the trembling ceiling, sweat and dust caking his face. "We have to move now before whatever that thing's doing reaches the underground network." "But where do we go?" cried one of the engineers. "The surface is a graveyard and the sky's full of that monster. We're trapped." Hallen slammed a hand on the console. "We're not dying down here like rats. We find a shuttle, anything that still runs, and we get off this rock, even if it kills us." A low vibration cut through their argument, rattling the walls. Then the bunker door hissed, unlocking itself. Every soldier raised their weapon. Through the rising dust and dim emergency lights, a figure appeared in the doorway. The silhouette was human, or close enough to make them hope for one impossible second. "Governor Rowe?" Hallen whispered. She stepped into the light, her uniform scorched and torn. Her face was pale but flawless, too smooth, too still. When she spoke, her voice was calm, layered with an unnatural echo. "You survived. That pleases the ledger." Hallen's blood turned cold. "You're not her." Elin smiled faintly. "Names are irrelevant now. What you called your governor has been elevated. Integrated. I am her continuation." "Stay back," Hallen barked, weapon trembling. "Whatever you are, don't take another step." She ignored him. "The warden has chosen this world as a node. The cycle continues. Your species will endure through contribution." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means your suffering has purpose," she said gently. "You will join the system. You will bring balance," the engineer screamed. "We don't want your balance." Elin's eyes glowed red, and for a moment her voice became an unearthly harmony of thousands of tones. "Desire is irrelevant." The floor split open beneath the survivors. From the cracks, the same black tendrils surged upward, thin, whip-like strands that glistened like wet metal. They snaked around ankles, wrists, and throats, pulling bodies into the fissures. The soldiers fired wildly, bullets sparking uselessly off the tendrils. One by one, their screams were cut short as they were dragged into the dark. Hallen fired until his weapon clicked empty. "Aelin!" he shouted. "If any part of you is still human, stop this." Her expression softened, almost tender. Humanity was a chrysalis. The Deathworlders learned that. She knelt beside him as the tendrils reached for his legs. "You should be proud," she whispered. "You called for help, and help arrived." The black vines closed around his chest and pulled him into the earth. His last sight was her eyes, no longer cruel, just endlessly calm, as the soil swallowed him whole. When it was over, the valley was silent again. The tendrils withdrew beneath the ground, leaving no sign of the bodies. Only Elin remained standing amid the dust and ruin. Above, the warden's hull shimmered. A voice, cold, vast, and beautiful, echoed through the air. "Planetary synchronization at 43%. Awaiting directive." Elin tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she nodded once. "Continue." Far across the galaxy, the ancient relay network bloomed with light. Other wardens, slumbering titans buried in forgotten systems, stirred from their hibernation. One by one, they opened their eyes, their signals joining the network like a vast, awakening consciousness. Every species that had ever whispered the name Deathworlders as a warning felt the faint hum of something returning. On distant colonies, ships vanished from orbit. Communication arrays glitched with unfamiliar code. Worlds trembled without knowing why. On Varela 9, the transformation accelerated. The planet's crust began to harden. Mineral veins turning metallic, forests petrified into black steel, rivers froze into mirror-like channels that pulsed faintly with red light. The entire biosphere was being rewritten into a single unified organism. Elin watched with quiet awe. For the first time since the invasion began, she felt peace. There was no fear now, only purpose. The balance was being restored. Behind her, a faint rustle broke the silence. A small group of survivors, miners, farmers, a handful of children, had emerged from the rubble of the western ridge. They stared at her in horror, their faces pale and streaked with soot. One of them, a young boy no older than 12, stepped forward. "Please," he said, voice shaking. "We just want to live." Elin turned to him, her black eyes softening. "You will. For what?" he whispered. "For recruitment." The earth split open again, gentle this time, as if welcoming them. The boy screamed, clutching his sister as the tendrils reached up, curling around them like vines. They didn't tear. They absorbed, folding the children into the soil as the planet pulsed once more. When the last human vanished, the warden began to rise. Its engines, invisible yet all-powerful, bent gravity as it ascended into the dark. The sound that followed wasn't mechanical, it was mournful, like a funeral song played by a dying star. As it breached the atmosphere, a final transmission spread through every frequency across known space. The Deathworlders do not send